Hi, everybody. It's Dan here, and I'd like to talk to you about an insight that I've had probably right from the beginning of my entrepreneurial career, which starts in 1974. So I'm just a short ways away from 50 years of being a full-time coach. And what I've noticed, we're in three countries, so started in Canada, then the U.S., and we're in the U.K. And what I've noticed is a lot of the most successful entrepreneurs are actually immigrants, and they've come from another country, and they, to a certain extent, voted with their feet. So they didn't like the opportunities and the conditions where they were, so they just decided to move there physically, and doing that, they had to go lightweight. There's a lot you have to leave behind, and there's a lot that you start with very little. And this is we have two stories here today of strategic coach clients, great strategic coach entrepreneurs who are immigrants. And Sunny, who moved to the United States from India, and Jose, who's from El Salvador, also to the US. But I think that entrepreneurs are also immigrants in the sense that only about 5% of the adult population in 1974 chose to be entrepreneurs in their life. 5% of the adult population, and today it's about 5% of the adult population. And so it's a minority activity. You're kind of an outlier, and probably a lot of you were outliers from a very early age. You weren't doing what the other kids were doing when you were young, and when you were a teenager, you weren't doing what the other kids did. And all through your life, you were out in the marketplace, facing the marketplace head on. And so you departed a long time ago from the normal way of making a living in life and having a career in life, and the life that goes along with normal ways of doing things. You don't really have a normal life. So I think a good framework for you to think about your choice to be an entrepreneur is that you're actually an immigrant. And since you are an immigrant, you should think like an immigrant, and you should act like an immigrant. And what I mean by that is that you leave a lot of things behind. And so you can only take what's in your suitcases, and you don't necessarily have a lot of money. And the only thing you have when you arrive in the new place is ambition and the ability to create value. Okay, and both Jose's story and Sunny's stories are just outstanding examples of how far they've come. Actually immigrants, but they were immigrants to begin with because they were entrepreneurs, or they became entrepreneurs. So it's a very interesting thing. So I want you to just appreciate and just luxuriate as you listen in the stories that Sunny and Jose tell about their journey from where they were born to a new country, and then their journey from not deciding at a certain point they just weren't going to live a normal life, and they live an entrepreneurial life, and realize that you've never been normal, and you're never going to be normal. One insight that I shared in one of my workshops was that entrepreneurs, and in Canada and the United States, I'm not entirely clear about the UK statistics here, but on average, immigrants, just immigrants period, not entrepreneurial immigrants, but immigrants from a lifetime income standpoint tend to do 40% better than native-born Americans, native-born Canadians, and I suspect it's true in the UK too. And the reason is that when you arrive, you have no connections. You have no reputation, you have no credibility. And so it's all got to be created. And the only thing you can focus on is opportunity. You really don't have the luxury of seeing the future as anything except opportunity. You can't see it as risk. You already took a risk, the biggest risk that anybody will take. You already took the risk. And so you don't have time to fool around with, is there security? You don't have time. There is no security. Okay, so the security is taken away from you right from the beginning. Okay, and you have nothing to fall back on. So the only thing you can really focus on is opportunity. So it looks like a big danger, but it's actually an incredible advantage. And as an entrepreneur, just say you don't have time and you don't have the luxury of thinking about risks and security and safety. You only have time to think about your future in terms of opportunity.
My entrepreneurial journey started in 2003 in New York City. But just to give you a little bit of background, I was born in India, in a village at a farm. So I'm a farmer boy. And for farmers, you'd normally kind of really maybe finish your 10th grade from your village school, and then you just, continue with your farm. And I chose a different path. I decided to come to America when I was about to be 18, so 17 and a half. And I couldn't speak English because it was all learning in my local language there. India was very different in 1993 when I moved to US. So it was just that, bigger opportunity, better life was my why of leaving my village in India and moving to US. And guess what? Where I landed from my village, where it was hard to even get electricity, to New York City, right next to New York City, Jersey City. And I'm seeing all these buildings and lights. And I'm like asking myself, hey, am I still on Earth? It was like hard to believe that there can be a city that exists on Earth. And it's just that contrast. So I landed in Jersey City, New Jersey, right next to Statue of Liberty in 1993. And I pumped gas because in New Jersey it's full-time gas station service. So that's the only job I could get because I didn't even have license yet. So I started pumping gas in New Jersey for 1 year because my father borrowed money to help me come to US. So I had to pay that loan off, and I started making money, started living with a few friends from my village. They were already living here. So after a year, when I got my license, and I'm like, hey guys, what's next? They were all driving New York City yellow cabs after the gas station. So they're like, hey, you can make a lot more money by driving cabs. So I'm like, okay, where do you go for license? So then I went to Queens in New York City to get my TLC yellow cab license. And I got my license and started driving full-time taxi, 7 days, 12 hours a day, night shift, 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. So I did that full-time for 2 years. So now it's like end of 95. And that's when I'm like, Father, I paid all the loan, and I bought him a new car. I was so proud to be that son where my father was the first one in the entire district to get a new car. And you're talking about 95, India was very different as back then. And that's when I'm like, Father, I want to finish my school. So I did my high school in India. So I wanted to go to college, bachelor degree. I happened to stop by a community college on my way to New York City before taking subway train. And I took that catalog, started going through this while my ride on subway to pick up my cab in New York City. And I saw there was a guy who could speak my language, Dr. J.S. Duggal. And I'm like, he can speak my language. I should go to him for guidance. Like, how can I get into college? What is required? And so he was very generous enough to give me some time after a couple of visits to that community college to get an appointment with him. And he guided me that, Sonny, first you have to take ESL, learn English, take basic English. And but it's good time to learn computers. And we're talking about January 1996, when Windows 95 was just kind of really getting into the like every household. And America Online was very famous at that time, like, you know, that dial-up modem type of stuff. So I started learning Fortran and C++ while learning English. So computer languages and English language I started learning in 96. I was there in that community college for about 2 years to get my English skills to a level where I could at least take college level courses. Then I transferred to NJIT. NJIT is New Jersey Institute of Technology, a good school for computer science, computer engineering. So I graduated in 2000, December, from NJIT with a computer engineering degree while driving cab on weekends. I did not borrow anything from, because I was not eligible for financial aid or student loan. So I had to make money to pay for my share of my shared apartment, and also save money for college to pay cash. And you pay a lot more than a resident when you don't have the permanent resident. So I was able to really go through that with full-time summer, 3 months of full-time yellow cab driving in summer to save some money. And then remaining, when my college was like full-time, taking 17, 18 credits every semester. And I was able to work part-time. So that's how I got myself through my computer engineering. 2000 comes. I was ready to move from taxi to tech. I'm like, I want to stop doing taxi and do whatever I can to get into technology job. So I got my first job in New York City, in Midtown New York City, with a public relations firm as a system admin. So this firm was in New York City, and they had a computer guy job available. So they named, you know, like the title was system admin. So I started working close to Times Square. I remember my first job, and they were like, you know, we don't have enough budget. I'm like, pay me anything. I just want to start getting into computer job. And whatever they gave me, I accepted. It was like $29,000 for a computer engineer graduate from NJIT. But I was just looking for that first job and opportunity. I did that. 2000 to 2003, I just worked full time. And then so after a year or so, because that money was not enough, I had now family. I got married in like last year of college. And so I had to make more money, and I asked my boss, my the owner of that PR firm who I was reporting to, that, hey, do you mind, is there any conflict of interest if I start doing some computer jobs over the weekend, some projects, just to make some extra money? He said, no problem, as long as you don't do it for another PR firm. And so I started, I kind of printed brochures at home. And if you know New York City, in every single building, there are hundreds of small businesses. So what I started doing was, during my lunch hour, I took this home printed brochure called Kaila Consulting, and I went to every single floor and left there with the receptionist that, hey, if you need a computer guy and you have a computer problem, I can only come after 5 p.m. or weekends, but I will charge you much, much less. And if, so I started getting some law firms, some marketing firms, some staffing firms in the same building I was working, because I had to be close to that building. So slowly but surely, they're like 5 companies, small businesses, they started using me with block of hours consulting fee. So they will pay me for 10 hours block, and then I will start helping them weekends whenever, and then I will start deducting money from that. So I was the computer guy for a few companies in that building. And then I'm like, this is great. So I started making a lot more money that way. And I went to my boss that, hey, I want to start my own business. And this is like now about to be 2003, March 2003. And I'm like, I want to start my own business. And he said, Sonny, I'm not going to let you do that unless you promise that you can operate from this this building, so that you can be close to me. And here is the contract for what you're doing right now on W-2. I want to be your client. And he loved me so much, my work ethics and everything. And he's like, I want you to be my IT company as well. And he was paying about $66,000 at that time. And he kind of immediately, he said, like, here is an agreement in writing, and you can be my consultant as well. So then that it's like, it was a good start. And he said, my win is that if you are in the same building, at the same floor, like he gave me free office as well. He's like, don't get space. My servers go down, my systems go down, you're right next to me. So my response time will be great, in comparison to me hiring another company. So he's like, and you get a free office, but you got to be here, operate from here, so that you are right next to us and you're going to be taking care of us personally. I'm like, sure. So that's how my income became, just a good start, that I could hire with a surplus of extra money. I could hire another tech. So I hired a tech, then 2 techs, 3 techs, and now we are 600 plus techs that are together working to make an impact in this world. And it's really people-focused journey, really earning people and not worrying about money, because money always followed with that mantra that I followed. And that's like my entrepreneurial journey of moving from taxi to tech in the probably center of the university called New York City. And now we are a global company with global capability to deliver IT support services, IT infrastructure services to any English-speaking country in the world.
In 1981, my parents and I came here as political refugees from El Salvador. We had to leave everything behind and start all over. It was because of the assassination of my uncle that after his death, the death squads told us that we all had to leave. And there was 10 of us that had to come to the United States within days, a couple weeks between beginning to end. But the rest of the family had to go in hiding because they were looking for us. And at this point, it was all women and children, with the exception of my father. And there was a lot of fear, and we had nowhere to go. I always like to try to explain it as similar feeling of being in a bad dream where you're running away from somebody. And then you suddenly wake up and you realize, oh, that was a really scary dream. But when you're fleeing a country because of some political persecution or a war, you don't ever wake up. That feeling is always going to be there, and it's always going to live with you. And it can either haunt you or it can inspire you to do more. And in this case, it's inspired us. But it wasn't easy for my parents. They were young, and they had to reinvent themselves. And we actually had a pretty stable life in El Salvador. But when we had to come here to the United States, we had to start all over. It really wasn't much that we had. The 10 of us had to find our way into the country. And there was a lot of challenges that went along with that. But then as soon as you get in the country, it's like it all starts then. That's it all starts. And when I was talking to my father about having this interview, and we're both really excited about it. And he was saying there's something that the United States offer us is the rule of law. And it's probably not so much the rule of law, like how it's used in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of cooperation that happens in the United States by respecting the rules that are engaged. And I'm not a systems and processes person, right? I'm not a person that loves rules. Like, I don't really thrive under too many rules. But I had a really good understanding of realizing that the best way to impact a change or to make a transformation is to play by the rules of the system. And then only as part of the system can you really make those changes. And that's kind of what we did. Like, that's what was really awesome about my parents, that they never made themselves a victim, not in front of us, at least. I'm sure they had those feelings of like, why the life isn't fair, or this isn't going to happen. Why did this happen to us? But that's not what they embodied to us. That's not what, I never grew up hearing about that. It was just like, well, we have an opportunity and we're going to have to go figure it out. When I started realizing how fortunate I was, and I started to have feelings of gratitude, at a young age, because I'm not in my home country where I could have been. And I would envision myself, what would life be if I stayed in El Salvador compared to what it is here? And then I knew that I had an opportunity. And then I started realizing that there's luck into this thing of life, and that I was on the right side of the tracks. But then it was like, I have to do something with this. I can't, it's not fair to the people who didn't have this opportunity. It's not fair to my family who came here as adults and had to figure all that out to find some kind of stable footing so they could provide for their family. And I had a huge sense of responsibility, you know, for finding my path and actually being a productive member of our community. Because but it was a fear. Like it wasn't like, oh, it's something I got to do. It's like a task, or like, oh, that would be nice. It was like, no, this is like, the alternative failure was just not an option. And again, so that commitment and that sense of responsibility was like starting to be like really ingrained into who I am. Then also watching my parents do the same thing too, where they were in, I mean, when you have to assimilate and you leave your hometown and you're a stranger, I mean, it's no different than going to a party where you don't know anybody, or going to a new school when you don't know anybody, or going into a new job and you don't know anybody. But can you imagine going into a new country where, as far as you can see, you don't know anybody, and then nothing makes sense. Everything's kind of confusing. Everything's an idiom. Everything's a piece of cake. You know, people tell you, you know, they'll give you the middle finger, and it's like, you have no idea what that means, right? And it's like, and you have to figure out all those things. So like constantly, you have to recreate yourself, but you have to be open to that that new experience, and really evolve as a being to try to do that. But I got to do that at the age of 4, right? So I was learning a new language, I was assimilating a new culture, I was figuring out how to engage people in different realities, what I felt like different realities. I used to tell people I felt like my life was a fishbowl. It was like, just imagine a goldfish living in a fishbowl. And then when I had to go outside of my house, I would jump out of that fishbowl and get into another one. And then I'd spend my day in there, and then I would jump back into the one in my house. And that's just kind of what it kind of felt, because it was still an individual journey that you have to do. Even at a young age, it's still very an individualistic pursuit to live your life. But then you still have to fit within the infrastructure or community. And that was the bowl. That was the bowl that I had to kind of maneuver, right? And I realized that, taking that bowl analogy, that the United States and where we were living was a place where we can be more of ourselves than it was in our native country, or our birth country, which we were kicked out of, right? And we were, and of no fault of mine, and nothing I had done or nothing my parents had done, but we had to go. So it was a pretty traumatic experience, that part. You want to provide value even at a young age. You really want to earn somebody's attention by providing value for them. And the stories I hear of my father and the stories about myself are so similar, of growing up to be able to do that. But I think that what really made it flourish is the infrastructure that the United States provided. And that infrastructure is really rooted in the belief of the individual and what that you can do. And it also has has within the Constitution, it kind of has a built-in rules of engagement for commerce. I mean, that's the history of the United States to be able to do that. So now that you put our families in here, people that are kind of driven like from entrepreneurial type people, and you put them into this country, and the sky's the limit. It's just wherever they think that the opportunity that lies in front of them. And the other thing I think that an immigrant does really well is that they get good at seeing the opportunity that's in front of them, right? It's not like, oh, what am I going to do? Or, and then you get into this like over idealistic, or maybe you dream a little bit too much, where you start not realizing what's actually right there in front of you, and how you can actually take those opportunities and really fulfill your financial, but also your personal goals. So your personal and your professional goals can really start to manifest themselves if you do that. Again, if you're provided with that right infrastructure and a certain sense of education, not in the traditional sense, but someone has to teach you the right mindsets. Like those have to come from somewhere. So I definitely got my entrepreneurial drive from my father. And my mother was also involved too. Like technically she was the owner of the business. She owned 100%, which I also thought was always so cool, that my father even trusted her with the business so much that he put it in her name. And that is also part of like, I know that's in Latin cultures or Latin America, it's like that. But I think in a lot of other cultures, and these, as far as you go back, it's always been there. Is that the role that the woman plays in the family, and that really the power that they actually truly have is, and I knew that in my house, that I knew that my mom was definitely the one in charge, and she still is. Like if we don't have her blessings, like it just doesn't feel right. The projection that the business is in right now really came into focus for us and for me when I understood what Dan was saying. Who do you want to be a hero to? And I know growing up, my parents always wanted to be a hero to us, my brother and I. And they said that's the only way they're able to get out of bed sometimes, because the pain and the trauma was so deep that they knew that they had to roll out of bed because they had kids, and then they had to do it. And every decision to move or every decision to make a purchase and everything was always had that focal point of living for something that's much bigger than yourself. And in this case, it was their kids, which is common, right? And it's a beautiful thing that to see unfold. And that's probably what projects humanity in the right direction is that. But as an entrepreneur, you start having those same kind of commitment or dedication to someone outside of yourself through your team, right? And your customers too, that you really want to be able to provide some value for them, so they can achieve what it is, their goals, or eliminate their dangers, like whatever it is that they're like on their personal pursuit. So for me, it was like realizing that I knew that you can be successful in the United States because of the country that we live in. And I also knew that the janitorial industry had a low barrier of entry because it worked for us. We started with $1,000. That's all the money my father had when he branched off of it, and it just had grit and preservation. From Dan, I learned that if you show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, you finish what you start, and say thank you and please, the sky's the limit. Like, boom, you're ready to go. And with that foundation, you have a chance to be an entrepreneur. It does take more than that, but through collaboration, you can find somebody else that maybe can clear some of those deficiencies, right? So for me, it was like I started realizing that if they have those four tendencies, that they still had some challenges. So they got a broom, they got a mop, they got a vacuum. They do those four things. And so now it's an issue about bridging the gap between language, culture, and education. And that is like my prime focus right now is within the janitorial industry, how can I find resources and tools? My eyes are paying attention, my ears are listening, because my mind is focused on that. And is where can I find those resources and tools to bridge the gap between language, culture, and education? And I feel like if I'm able to do that, then I'm able to take some really smart people that are actually deserving and capable of cleaning and actually make them successful businesses. And for a lot of them, it's the drive for multi-generational wealth. Another way of saying it is like, I just want to provide for my children. I just want my children to have a better life than I did. And that is like a really powerful fuel for a lot of people. And then with modern communication tools like video, is one of them, translation software is another one, that are all free and starting to get really affordable. Like how can you kind of repackage those to actually work in your favor? And it's working, and then we're able to provide a higher quality of service. And then if we're hiring other subcontractors to have their own small businesses, we team up. We do the sales, we manage the money, and then they provide the labor. And we do it in a very transparent way where the client understands that this isn't like I'm not pretending they're my employees. They're actually independent entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are immigrants. Because I found that there's a lot of people that love hearing the immigrant story because it's very relatable, right? And that's one thing I'd like to say too about the immigrant story. Like I was saying, at a young age, I learned how to tell that story. And one of the really cool things that it never stops doing, the response that I can almost predict, I'm going to say 90% of the time, what I'm going to hear from the person. I will tell them the story. They say, wow, thank you for telling me that story. And they almost immediately go into telling you their family story. Maybe it was their parents. Maybe it was the grandparents. Maybe it was 3 generations. But in North America, it's pretty, it can only go back so far. So a lot of people do that, right? And so there's the immigrant story is really more of a story that brings us together and actually finds commonality into it. And then I'm realizing that the immigrant story is more of an individual pursuit than it is a geopolitical crossing of a line. You know, like I never understood that. I'm like we kill each other for an invisible line, and we grant the power to somebody to say that's their line because they said it's their line. And there's a sense of cooperation that has to go along with that, right? So it's not all doom and gloom, but people do die over those things. And there's a status quo and power that tries to control it for as long as they can, and they don't like that. But the cool thing about this is that we now have a whole new borders now with what Dean Jackson and Dan Sullivan love to call the Cloudlandia, right? And in Cloudlandia, you can't put borders like that. You know, it's probably almost impossible. Even if you have powerful governments trying to regulate what's going in there, there's still a stronger force trying to be the antithesis of that or to change that. And that the nature of the internet is always, or it has been, and hopefully will always be more of a free realm. So what's really neat about being an entrepreneur now is that you have that whole infrastructure available to you that has endless amounts of collaboration. And again, of like where the focus is, where the business now is finding those other entrepreneurs that are actually capable or talented and have all the ingredients to be successful in how they see themselves or they want to be successful. Not how I think it's successful, but how they think it's successful, and not how, you know, what one entrepreneur needs in money is going to be very different than somebody else. But here again, we're able to do that. And that's the spirit of the business that we have now, is like, I want to find those. And I feel that for round numbers, only 20% of the global population has actually had access to a platform to collaborate with other individuals. So another way of saying that is that we have about 80% of our talent pool hasn't even been tapped into. Like, we don't even know. We think there could be like geniuses in the middle of Africa with somebody that barely even has access to electricity. We just don't know. So now if we just give them the computer and the internet, allow them to like kind of go on its own and crawl the web, and the opportunities are going to really start presenting themselves for that individual, but for all of humanity. And I think we're at that beginning point, and like it was like in Star Trek, we're going where no man has gone before, you know, like uncharted territories. We are uncharted territories with the internet, but not the uncharted territory isn't through the control of the big companies. The uncharted territory is when you let it be who it wants to be. And the open source mentality a lot of companies have, right? And that's kind of where we're at as well too. And the stuff that you create is the same way. Let's just put it out there. Let's write books and just give them for free. And then you're going to attract the right kind of people, instead of like trying to hold it on like it's an asset, like it's yours. It's like, no, we're this is going to be a magnet to attract the right people, and then together we're going to build the community, and that community is itself going to have the inertia. So it's a similar thing that we're doing a Clean Solution, where it's like, well, what worked for us? We've created millions and millions of dollars. We've created multi-generational wealth. We have the freedom of time, purpose, and relationships now. Why can't somebody else have it? And why would I not share that with somebody else? And then when you share it with them, you just attract the right people. The people that don't get it act confused and they don't even get it. And then so it's an easy way to expand your capabilities, your potential as a business, just by sharing what it is that you know, but you share it with the whole world. When you work with an immigrant or you're collaborating with an immigrant, the advantage isn't that they're how educated they are or how fancy they're in. It's that grit and the perseverance, right? That just nothing's going to get in their way, and they're going to keep going, and they appreciate the opportunity and they don't take it for granted. So that positive attitude that they come constantly like, okay, let's go do it. What do you need now? How are we going to do it next time? Even when you've lost a million times, like you have to be comfortable with failure as an immigrant, because you're not going to fit in. It's like, so you've already failed at that. You're already failing at a human drive to be socially acceptable, right? Because you're banking on your individuality, that you put enough money on the table and bet on yourself that you can figure this out. And what that ends up doing in the long run is that you're not going to attract a lot of people, but you're going to attract the right people. I didn't have the confidence that I have now, but I've gotten that confidence from Strategic Coach, because I've learned that feeling of feeling like you're an immigrant probably isn't ever going to go away, right? And that I have to lean into that, and we all feel that way. It's like we're all immigrants in our own ways, and I think we associate the word immigrant because, again, there's an invisible line that somebody said, you that's your side and this is my side. Someone we have nothing to do with, right? But we go along with it. When you take that line away, then it's just up to us. It's what we want to do. And then you have to really look around you. It's like, well, what motivates me? For most of them, it's their loved ones, their significant other, or maybe their parents or their children, or even their pets, right? Or even their community. It's like, and then when you put intentionality into that, you want to nurture it for a lot longer, and then you want to see it flourish and stand on its own 2 feet. And that's the same love that I bring to my work and to our business, and working with other subcontractors and developing systems and processes that can actually make it so it can perpetuate itself without having to be about me or my parents or the founders and the owners. And now the people that we have coming into our business as subcontractors, and we don't even like to call them subcontractors because really they're partners, and we call them the Clean Solution Collective. And they're not a sell of us. We're actually doing this together. But now our systems or processes where people are well on their way of making millions and millions of dollars on their own, and people I've never met. And that is so rewarding and gratifying. You have to love seeing things flourish on their own, and knowing that you had a small hand in it, and then value the individual and the uniqueness that they bring to the team and their journey to find their uniqueness, right? And then you could provide a place for them to do that. And that's what this country did for us. That's what I believed it did. That's what I still believe that it does. I know it doesn't do it for everybody, but it did for me. And I want to create that for somebody else, and to know that we share that vision, and as the leader that I can help illuminate that for somebody, is like, that makes me feel so good. And the byproduct is the money. That's the byproduct. And I get to have that money. They get to have that money. The community gets to have that money. This country gets to have this money. And now I love hiring people from India, Latin America, Pakistan. These are all like young people, that you can tell they have problems with English and they're trying to figure it out. I'm sitting there like, yeah, I need this made for me. Can you do it? And I just love that, and it's just starting. Like, those people are just joining the internet. It's just such a great time to be alive.